Alex Roberts sat in his luxurious office, surrounded by costly artworks, leather furnishings, and a panoramic view that overlooked the bustling metropolis. He had it all. Wealth, fame, power, but something was missing. It haunted him every day, especially now that he was in his mid-30s. People admired him for his success, but deep inside, Alex felt empty. Alex wasn't just any billionaire. He was tall with a lean, athletic build that came from years of regular exercise. His chiseled jawline, sharp cheekbones, and perfectly symmetrical face made him stand out wherever he went. His smooth dark skin seemed to glow, and his short, well-maintained hair always added to his polished appearance. Women often complimented him on his piercing brown eyes that seemed to reflect both his charm and his intelligence. He was the kind of man who could easily attract attention without even trying. Despite all this, Alex found it difficult to find real love. The women who came into his life were always attracted to his fortune or his looks, not to him as a person. It was exhausting, meeting person after person, hoping for a connection, only to realize they were more interested in his bank account than his heart. Alex's background was just as luxurious as the life he lived now. He was born into a wealthy family, one of the richest in the country. Growing up, he had never known what it felt like to struggle or be poor. His childhood was filled with private tutors, vacations in the most exotic places, and everything he ever wanted handed to him without question. By the time he started his own company, success seemed almost guaranteed. As his business took off, his wealth multiplied, securing his position among the elite. But now, surrounded by luxury and privilege, Alex felt trapped. He had never experienced what it was like to live a normal life, to blend in with people who had no idea what it was like to be rich. And that was exactly what he needed. To step out of his world of affluence and see what it was like to be just a regular person. He was tired of people seeing him as a walking bank account. He longed for a connection that wasn't based on his status or money. That evening, Alex attended yet another fancy gala filled with the elite of the city. He arrived in his shiny car, wearing a tailored suit, and instantly became the center of attention. Women approached him with smiles, complimenting his success and good looks, but all he could feel was frustration. No one saw the man behind the suit, they only saw the handsome billionaire CEO. As the night wore on, Alex grew tired. He excused himself and left the event early. Back at his mansion, he walked through the empty hallways, feeling lonelier than ever. He poured himself a drink and sat down in his study, his thoughts racing. There had to be a way to find someone who loved him for who he really was. Then an idea struck him, a plan that seemed crazy but just might work. Alex would leave his life of luxury behind and live as an ordinary man. He would disguise himself as a modest security guard, blending in with everyday people. That way, he could find out who truly cared about him, not his money or his looks. The next morning, Alex set his plan in motion. He arranged for his company to run smoothly in his absence and made plans to live in a modest neighborhood. His staff were puzzled but followed his orders without question. Alex knew this was a risky move, but he was determined to go through with it. He couldn't live like this any longer. As he packed a small bag with old clothes, leaving his expensive suits behind, Alex felt a strange sense of freedom. For the first time in his life, he would experience what it was like to live without the comforts of wealth. This would be the start of a new life, a simpler life where no one knew about his billions or his handsome face. It was time to find true love. The sun was just beginning to rise as Alex stood in front of the small, rundown apartment he had rented. It was nothing like the sprawling mansion he was used to. The walls were cracked, the paint peeling, and the furniture sparse. The place smelled of damp air, and the sounds of the city filtered in through the thin windows. Alex had never lived in such conditions, but this was the life he had chosen. He wanted to experience what it meant to live without the comforts he had always taken for granted. Dressed in an old security uniform, Alex looked at himself in the mirror. Gone was the sharp, well-groomed look of a billionaire CEO. Now he was just another face in the crowd. His once perfectly styled hair was hidden under a worn-out cap, and his shiny shoes had been replaced with cheap, worn ones. For the first time in his life, Alex felt completely anonymous, and it brought him a strange sense of excitement. He hopped on his old motorcycle, which he had bought the previous day, far from the luxury cars he usually drove, and headed to his new job as a security guard at a local supermarket. The neighborhood was modest, full of small shops and street vendors. Nobody here knew who he was. It was exactly what he wanted, a chance to blend in and live like a regular person. When he arrived at the supermarket, Alex met his new colleagues, fellow security guards and staff, who welcomed him with friendly smiles and banter. They had no idea that the man standing next to them was one of the wealthiest men in the country. Alex felt a wave of relief. He was finally out of the spotlight, just a simple security guard among many. It was a busy afternoon when Alex's first encounter with a customer left him questioning his new life. She was a young woman, well-dressed with flashy jewelry and an air of superiority. As she entered the supermarket, she barely glanced at Alex, treating him as if he were invisible. After a while, she returned to the entrance, her hands full of bags. She looked around and spotted Alex, her eyes narrowing with disdain. "You, security man," she called out, her voice laced with impatience. "Carry these bags to my car. That's what you're here for, isn't it?" Alex blinked momentarily, taken aback by her tone. He wasn't used to being spoken to like that, but he reminded himself that this was part of the life he had chosen. No one here knew him. He stepped forward politely, picking up the bags, but the woman was far from satisfied. "Hurry up," she snapped, glaring at him as though he were beneath her. "I don't have all day." Alex silently carried the bags to her shiny car, a model he used to own himself. She didn't bother thanking him. Instead, she drove off without a second glance, leaving Alex standing there wondering if this experiment of his was worth it. Days passed, and Alex tried to brush off the encounter, focusing on his job and blending in with the locals. But his next experience would prove even more disheartening. It was late in the afternoon when Alex noticed a young woman struggling with a shopping cart. She was dressed in expensive clothes and had a look of irritation on her face as she tried to maneuver the cart towards the supermarket entrance. Being the helpful person he was, Alex approached her with a smile. "Do you need some help with that?" he asked kindly, offering to push the cart for her. The woman turned and gave him a look of disgust. "No, thank you," she said coldly, her eyes sweeping over him with disdain. "I don't need help from someone like you." Alex was stunned by her response. "Someone like me?" he echoed, unsure of what she meant. "You know, a common security guard," she replied, her tone dripping with condescension. "I'm sure you have more important things to do than bother me." Without waiting for a response, she pushed the cart herself and walked away, leaving Alex standing there, embarrassed and confused, as he watched her disappear into the store. Alex felt a sinking feeling in his chest. Would anyone ever see him for who he really was? So far, the women he had encountered had either treated him like a servant or looked down on him because of his apparent lack of wealth. Alex had come into this experiment hoping to find someone who could love him for himself. But after these experiences, he began to wonder if that was even possible. In this new life, he was just another poor security guard, and it seemed like no one was interested in getting to know the man behind the uniform. Doubt started to creep in. Maybe this plan wasn't such a good idea after all. Maybe no one would ever care about the real Alex, not when they saw him in such a lowly position. And yet, despite these negative experiences, Alex knew he couldn't give up. He had to believe that somewhere out there was a woman who could love him for who he truly was, without the wealth and power that had always defined his life. The sun was blazing down on Alex as he stood at his post, watching customers come and go from the supermarket. It had been a long, tiring day, and he was starting to wonder if this experiment was worth it. After the rude encounters with some of the customers, Alex's faith in people was beginning to falter. He was lost in thought when a sharp voice cut through the noise. "You there, security. Come here." A woman dressed in high heels and a designer dress stood near the parking lot, glaring at Alex as though he had done something wrong. Alex approached her, trying to keep his composure. "Yes, ma'am. How can I help you?" She rolled her eyes and pointed to a cart full of groceries. "Take this to my car. I'm not about to break a nail pushing that thing." Alex nodded, forcing a polite smile as he grabbed the cart. She led him to her car, barking orders along the way. Be careful with the bags and hurry up, I don't have all day. As Alex loaded the groceries into her car, his patience was wearing thin. He had dealt with people like this before, but it felt different now that he wasn't in his usual position of power. The woman continued to insult him, muttering under her breath about lazy security guards and how people like him should work harder. Just as Alex was about to lose his temper, a gentle voice interrupted the tense moment. "Excuse me, miss. I don't think you need to be so rude to him." Alex looked up, surprised. Standing beside the woman was another customer, a young woman with a kind face and soft eyes. She was dressed simply in jeans and a casual blouse, her hair pulled back into a ponytail. There was something about her presence that immediately calmed the situation. The rude woman turned to her, her eyes narrowing. "Mind your business, ma'am. This is between me and the security guard." But the young woman wasn't backing down. "It's not right to treat people like that. He's just doing his job, which I don't think includes you ordering him around." Alex watched in awe as the rude customer huffed, clearly frustrated before storming off without another word. The young woman turned to Alex with a warm smile. "I'm sorry about that. Some people can be really difficult." Alex smiled, backing a wave of gratitude. "Thank you. That was unexpected." She shrugged her shoulders, her smile never fading. "It's nothing. People need to learn to treat others with respect, no matter who they are." As she spoke, Alex felt an instant attraction to her. Her kindness was so different from what he had experienced over the past few weeks. He hadn't expected anyone to stand up for him, let alone a complete stranger. "Please, may I know your name?" Alex asked, hoping to keep the conversation going. "I'm Emily," she replied, extending her hand. "And you are?" "Alex." He shook her hand, hesitating for a moment before adding, "Just a security guard." Emily laughed softly. "Well, Alex, it's nice to meet you. Don't let people like her get to you. You're doing a great job." For the rest of the day, Alex couldn't stop thinking about Emily. There was something about her that was different from everyone else he had met. She didn't seem to care about wealth or status. She had come to his defense without knowing anything about him. Her kindness felt genuine, and for the first time in a long time, Alex felt like he had met someone who might see him for who he really was. As she walked away that afternoon, Alex found himself hoping that he would see her again. He had been looking for someone who would love him for the man he truly was. And maybe, just maybe, he had found her. Over the next few weeks, Alex and Emily's connection grew stronger. She visited the supermarket more frequently, and each time, they found themselves talking for longer and longer. It started with casual conversations about their day, but soon they were exchanging phone numbers and texting outside of work. Alex looked forward to seeing her, and every time she appeared, his heart raced just a little bit faster. The more time they spent together, the more Alex found himself falling for her. Her kindness, her laugh, and the way she seemed to care about people without expecting anything in return. It all drew him closer to her. But as Alex's feelings deepened, so did his internal conflict. He wanted to be honest with Emily about who he really was, but every time he thought about telling her the truth, fear stopped him. He worried that revealing his true identity as a billionaire CEO might change things between them. Would she still see him the same way? Would their relationship be tainted by his wealth? The last thing he wanted was for Emily to think he had been deceiving her. As Alex wrestled with these thoughts, Emily opened up to him about her struggles one evening after a casual dinner. She shared something that made his heart sink. "My father's been really sick," Emily said quietly, her eyes downcast. "He's been in and out of the hospital for months now, and the medical bills are piling up. It's been hard on my family. We've sold most of our valuables, but it's still not enough." Alex listened, feeling a wave of sympathy wash over him. Emily was so strong, always wearing a smile, but beneath the surface, she was carrying the weight of her family's troubles. He could see the pain in her eyes, the worry she tried so hard to hide. "I'm so sorry, Emily," Alex said softly. "Is there anything I can do to help?" Emily shook her head, smiling sadly. "No, I just needed to talk about it. I'll figure something out." But Alex couldn't stand the thought of her struggling. He wanted to help, but he knew that offering her money might complicate things, especially when she still believed he was just a simple security guard. Yet, the thought of Emily's father suffering while she worried about how to pay the bills weighed heavily on his heart. That night, Alex lay awake, thinking about what he could do. He had the power to fix this problem, but he couldn't reveal his wealth without risking his relationship with Emily. After much thought, he came up with a plan. He would use his connections to secretly pay for her father's medical bills, ensuring that the family wouldn't have to struggle any longer. Emily wouldn't need to know that it was him. He could arrange it all quietly. The next morning, Alex made a few calls to a private hospital where Emily's father was being treated. He instructed them to send the bills directly to him without informing the family. It wasn't difficult, after all. Alex had access to resources that most people could only dream of. The hospital agreed, and within hours, Emily's father's outstanding bills were settled. Alex hoped this would ease Emily's burden, but as soon as the payment was made, a new worry settled over him. What if Emily found out? What if she started asking questions? He had acted out of love, but he feared that his secret generosity might backfire and make things worse. The last thing he wanted was to lose Emily because of a misunderstanding, but he couldn't stand by and watch her suffer either. For now, Alex decided to keep quiet. He would continue to see Emily, hoping that his secret would remain hidden and that she would never have to know what he had done behind the scenes. But deep down, he knew that secrets had a way of coming out, and when they did, the consequences could be more than he was ready to face. Emily was all smiles when she arrived at the supermarket that afternoon. Alex noticed her bright mood immediately. "You won't believe what happened," she exclaimed, her eyes lighting up. "What's going on?" Alex asked, trying to match her energy, though his heart raced in anticipation of what she might say. "It's my father," Emily said, her voice full of relief. "The hospital called this morning and told us that his bills have been paid in full, all of it. They said it was an anonymous donation from a secret admirer." Alex forced a smile, his chest tightening. He hadn't expected the hospital to mention anything about a secret admirer. Now, Emily thought someone was out there watching her, and he wasn't sure how to feel about that. "Wow, that's incredible," Alex replied, trying to sound surprised. "Do you have any idea who might have done it?" Emily shook her head, her smile not fading. "No, not at all. The doctor just said it was a generous act from someone who didn't want to be known. I mean, can you believe it? My dad's health has been weighing on me for months, and now we don't have to worry about the bills anymore." Alex nodded, though inside he was conflicted. Part of him was happy to see Emily so relieved, but another part of him feared what might happen if she ever learned the truth. For now, though, she was unaware, and that would have to be enough. As they continued talking, Emily's friends arrived at the supermarket. They greeted Alex briefly before pulling Emily aside. Alex watched as they chatted quietly a few feet away. Noticing that Emily's smile had faded a bit, he wondered what they were talking about. Later that evening, Emily met up with her friends at a cafe, where the conversation quickly turned to her relationship with Alex. One of her closest friends, Julia, was particularly vocal about her concerns. "I don't know, Emily," Julia said, stirring her drink. "I mean, you're beautiful, smart, and you could have anyone you want. Why settle for Alex? He's just a security guard. You should be aiming higher." Emily sighed, rolling her eyes slightly. "I've heard this before, Julia, but it's not about money or status for me. I've never felt this way about anyone else. Alex is kind, and he understands me. That's all that matters." Julia wasn't convinced. "But think about it. You're struggling with your family's financial problems, and here you are falling in love with someone who can barely support himself. You should at least be with someone who can help you out in life." Emily frowned, feeling the pressure from Julia's words. "I know it doesn't seem practical, but Alex makes me happy. He's different from anyone I've ever met." Julia leaned in, lowering her voice. "Emily, you deserve more than a poor security guard. You're too good for him." Another friend, Miriam, chimed in. "Maybe Julia has a point. You're still young, Emily. Don't rush into this." Emily bit her lip, feeling torn. She didn't care about Alex's financial situation. She had fallen in love with him for who he was, not for what he had or didn't have. But her friend's persistent warnings weighed on her. I'm not rushing into anything, Emily said softly. I love him, and that's what matters to me. Julia sighed and shook her head. Just don't say we didn't warn you. Meanwhile, Alex was battling his own troubles. As much as he cherished his time with Emily, his focus on their growing relationship had begun to take a toll on his business. Calls from his company's board members had become more frequent and filled with urgency. His company was on the verge of closing a major deal, a deal that could either catapult them to new heights or send everything crashing down. But Alex's mind wasn't fully on the business. He found it hard to concentrate, distracted by his feelings for Emily and the constant fear that his secret might be revealed. Every time they were together, the weight of his deception grew heavier. He wondered how much longer he could keep pretending, how much longer he could keep Emily in the dark about his true identity. One evening, after receiving yet another call from his company, Alex realized just how serious the situation had become. The board was growing frustrated with his lack of focus, and the deal was slipping through their fingers. They needed his leadership and his attention, but Alex wasn't sure how to balance his role as CEO with his new life as a simple security guard. As he lay in bed that night, his phone buzzing with missed messages from work, Alex knew he had to make a decision. Could he keep up the charade, hiding his true identity from Emily while trying to save his company? Or would his secret, along with his growing distraction, cause everything he had worked so hard for to come crashing down? Alex's heart ached at the thought of losing Emily. But he also couldn't afford to lose his company. The pressure mounted, and with every passing day the risks grew greater. One wrong move, and everything he held dear could unravel. Alex had been living on edge for weeks, struggling to balance his growing relationship with Emily and the demands of his company. His mind was constantly occupied, worrying about the deal that was slipping away and whether his secret would be exposed. But he never expected the truth to come out the way it did. One evening, Emily stopped by Alex's small apartment after work. She had come to spend some time with him, as they often did. Alex, exhausted from another stressful day of dealing with calls from his board, barely noticed when she started tidying up some of the papers he had left scattered on his table. Emily was moving a stack of documents when something slipped out, a sleek silver business card that looked out of place among Alex's humble belongings. Curious, she picked it up and stared at it, her brow furrowing as she read the name printed on it. Alex Roberts, CEO, R Enterprises. Emily's heart stopped for a moment. She stared at the card in disbelief. There was no way this could be true, right? Alex had always told her he was just a security guard. Why would he have a business card with the name of a CEO? Her mind raced with questions, but instead of confronting Alex right away, she quietly slipped the card into her purse. That night, when Emily got home, she pulled out her laptop and began searching the name on the business card. What she found left her speechless. Plastered across countless articles and interviews was Alex Roberts, the handsome billionaire CEO of a massive business empire. There were photos of him at glamorous events, articles about his success, and even pictures of him standing next to famous personalities. Everything she thought she knew about Alex crumbled in an instant. He had lied to her. He had been pretending to be someone he wasn't, and she felt humiliated. The next day, Emily confronted Alex. She walked into the supermarket, her expression cold and distant. Alex greeted her with a smile, but it quickly faded when he saw the look in her eyes. "We need to talk," Emily said, her voice flat. Alex's stomach twisted in knots. He could tell something was wrong. "What's going on?" he asked. Without a word, Emily pulled out the business card and held it up. "Explain this," she demanded. Alex's face drained of color. He had hoped to reveal the truth on his own terms, but now that hope was shattered. He stammered, trying to find the right words, but nothing came out. "I looked you up," Emily continued, her voice rising with anger. "You're not just a security guard. You're a billionaire CEO. Why did you lie to me? Was this some kind of game to you? Were you just using me as an experiment to see how long you could fool me?" "No, it's not like that," Alex said, stepping forward, but she took a step back, her eyes filled with betrayal. "What is it like, Alex? You've been lying to me this whole time. I trusted you, and now I find out that everything we've built is based on a lie." Alex's heart sank. I didn't mean for it to be this way. I never wanted to hurt you. I wanted to find someone who would love me for who I am, not for my money or status. That's why I didn't tell you. Emily shook her head, tears brimming in her eyes. You should have trusted me enough to tell the truth from the beginning. You've made me feel like a fool. I wasn't trying to deceive you, Alex pleaded. My feelings for you are real, Emily. I love you. But Emily wasn't listening. The hurt ran too deep. I can't do this, she whispered, turning away. I need time to think. Alex reached out, but she walked away, leaving him standing there devastated. For days, Alex tried to reach out to Emily, but she ignored his calls and messages. She needed space, and Alex didn't know if he would ever get the chance to make things right. At the same time, his business was beginning to spiral out of control. The major deal his company had been working on was now hanging by a thread, and the board was growing, increasingly frustrated with his distraction. One evening, Alex sat alone in his small apartment, lost in thought. His phone buzzed with yet another call from his head of operations, reminding him that the company's future depended on this deal. But his mind was elsewhere, on Emily and on the mess he had created. Just when things couldn't seem to get worse, Alex's parents learned about the trouble he was in. They were furious. They had worked hard to help him build our enterprises, and now it seemed like he was throwing it all away for some youthful fantasy. You need to get your priorities straight, Alex, his father said sternly over the phone. This company is your future. You're risking it by being absent too long. Focus on the business, or you'll regret it. Alex knew his father was right. His company was on the verge of collapse, and if he didn't get it together soon, everything he had built would fall apart. But the thought of losing Emily weighed heavily on his heart. He had hoped to fix things with her, but now he had no choice but to return to his company and deal with the crisis with a heavy heart. Alex packed his things and returned to the world he had left behind. The conflict between him and Emily remained unresolved, but for now, his focus had to be on saving the business. Alex returned to his corporate life with a heavy heart. The weight of his unresolved issues with Emily still pressed on him. But as soon as he stepped back into his office, the problems of the company quickly took center stage. It became clear that during his absence, things had taken a dark turn. His main competitor, Victor Miller, had used Alex's distraction to his advantage. Victor had quietly sabotaged several key deals, spreading false information about Alex's company, our enterprises, and snatching up potential clients before Alex's team could close their contracts. The damage was severe, and Alex's once solid company was now on shaky ground. The shareholders were furious. Contracts that had been on the verge of finalization were now falling apart, and the board members were pointing fingers at Alex for being distracted. The situation had grown so dire that even Alex's father, who was also a board member, had joined the chorus of complaints. This is unacceptable, Alex, his father said sternly during a heated board meeting. You've let the company slide into chaos because you weren't focused. We can't afford this kind of negligence, not after everything we've worked for. Alex clenched his fists under the table, feeling the weight of their accusations. He had founded our enterprises, built it from the ground up, but now it felt like he was losing control of everything he had worked for. One of the shareholders, a man who had always been critical of Alex, stood up. If this continues, we'll have no choice but to replace you as CEO. The threat hit Alex like a punch to the gut. The idea of being removed from the company he had created, the empire he had built with his own hands, was unthinkable. But he could see the frustration in the eyes of the board. They were serious. I'm not going to let that happen, Alex said firmly, though his voice wavered slightly. I'll fix this, I'll turn it around. But as the meeting ended, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that he was running out of time. His competitors had already taken advantage of his absence, and now even his own company was turning against him. Meanwhile, Emily's life had grown more complicated. Her father's health, which had briefly improved, began to deteriorate again. The hospital reached out to Alex, unaware of the tension between him and Emily. They informed him that her father's condition was worsening, and that they needed further treatment plans. Alex's heart sank when he heard the news. Even though Emily wasn't speaking to him, He couldn't abandon her family. He had the resources to help, and he couldn't bear the thought of her father suffering without telling anyone. Alex quietly arranged for the hospital bills to be paid once again, keeping his involvement a secret. But as he continued to support Emily's family from a distance, he couldn't help but feel the sting of their broken relationship. He wanted to reach out to her to fix things, but every time he tried, the memory of her anger and betrayal held him back. One day, as Alex was leaving his office late at night, he noticed someone waiting for him outside the building. It was Julia, one of Emily's closest friends. She had been persistent in her disapproval of Alex, but now there was something different about the way she looked at him. "Julia, what are you doing here?" Alex asked, confused. Julia smiled, stepping closer to him. "I've been thinking, Alex, now that I know who you really are, I see things differently." Alex's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" Julia's smile widened as she placed a hand on his arm. "You're not just some poor security guard. You're a powerful CEO, one of the most successful men in the country. Emily's a fool for turning her back on you." Alex took a step back, uneasy. "What are you getting at, Julia?" Julia's eyes gleamed with ambition. "I'm saying you deserve someone who appreciates what you have to offer, someone like me. I've always admired you, Alex, even before I knew who you really were. We could be good together." Alex was taken aback. He had never seen Julia in this light before, but now it was clear she wasn't interested in him. She was interested in his wealth and his power. She was everything he had hoped to avoid when he started this whole experiment. "Julia, I'm not interested," Alex said firmly, stepping away from her. "I appreciate what you're saying, but Emily is the one I care about," he added. Julia's face twisted in frustration. "Emily's been ignoring you for weeks. Why waste your time on someone who doesn't even want you?" Alex shook his head. "Emily doesn't care about my money. That's why I'm with her. She understands the real me, not just the billionaire." Julia scoffed. "And where has that gotten you? She's left you hanging. You're better off with someone who sees the full picture." But Alex wasn't swayed. "I'm only interested in Emily. Julia, I don't need anyone else." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Julia standing there, her attempts at seduction failing. Alex felt exhausted. The pressure from his company, the unresolved issues with Emily, and now Julia's advances, it was all weighing on him. But despite everything, his feelings for Emily hadn't changed. He loved her, and he would wait as long as it took for her to come around. For now, though, he had to focus on saving his company before it was too late. While Alex was consumed with the pressure of saving his company and regaining control of his business, another figure entered the scene, one who would complicate matters even more for him and Emily. Victor Miller, a rival CEO and a man of great wealth and influence, had recently taken an interest in Emily. He had been introduced to her by the principal of the school where she taught, who spoke highly of her humility and character. "Emily, I want you to meet Victor, my nephew," the principal had said one afternoon. Victor was charming, always impeccably dressed, and he made it clear that he admired Emily's simplicity. But what caught her attention was how quickly he started catering to her, openly flaunting his wealth and success. It didn't take long for Emily's friends and colleagues to notice. They whispered among themselves, envious of her newfound attention. Victor sent her lavish gifts, offered to take her out to expensive restaurants, and even offered to help her family with their ongoing financial struggles. Everywhere Emily went, people were talking about her and Victor. But Emily, things were far more complicated. She still had feelings for Alex, despite his lies and the pain he had caused. She couldn't forget him, no matter how hard she tried. Yet, at the same time, Victor represented everything her friends and family had always told her she needed. A stable, wealthy man who could offer her and her family security. One evening, Victor invited Emily to a high-end restaurant for dinner. She hesitated at first but accepted, hoping to clear her head and figure out her feelings. As they sat down at the elegantly set table, Victor wasted no time in complimenting her. "You know, Emily, I've met many women in my life, but none quite like you," he said, flashing her a confident smile. "You're genuine, kind, and humble, qualities that are hard to find." Emily smiled politely, but inside she felt conflicted. Victor seemed perfect on paper, successful, generous, and attentive. But there was something missing, something she couldn't quite put her finger on. As they talked, Victor brought up her father's health. "I know things have been tough with your family, and I'd like to help," he said casually, as though it were a small favor. "I have the means to take care of your father's medical bills, and I want to make sure you're not struggling anymore." Emily's heart skipped a beat. Could Victor have been the one who had been secretly paying her father's hospital bills all along? The thought crossed her mind, and suddenly it made sense. He had the wealth, the connections, and now he was offering to help openly. Maybe he had been her father's mysterious benefactor all along. "Was it you?" Emily asked, her voice soft. "Were you the one paying for my father's medical bills?" Victor hesitated for just a second, but then smiled and leaned back in his chair. "I didn't want to say anything," he said smoothly. "But yes, I've always admired you, Emily, and I've been helping where I can. I didn't want to see you or your family suffer." Relief and gratitude washed over Emily, and for the first time she warmed up to Victor. He seemed honest, generous, and willing to support her in ways that Alex hadn't been able to. But as much as she wanted to believe that Victor was the right choice, a part of her still couldn't let go of Alex. Her heart was torn between the two men. Back at the hospital, Emily's father was steadily improving, thanks to the continued anonymous payments. Victor had taken advantage of her assumptions, allowing her to believe that he was the one supporting her family, even though it was really Alex who had been quietly paying the bills all along. As Emily's feelings for Victor grew more complicated, so did her family's pressure. Her mother especially began encouraging her to seriously consider Victor's proposal. "He's a good man, Emily," her mother said one evening. "Victor can take care of us. Your father's health is improving and we still need help. Victor has been so kind." Emily was torn. On one hand, she knew Victor could offer her family the security they desperately needed. He had wealth, influence, and was ready to help them without asking for much in return. But on the other hand, her heart still belonged to Alex, even though he had lied to her and kept his identity a secret. Meanwhile, Victor wasn't wasting any time. Sensing that Emily was beginning to soften towards him, he made his intentions clear. He visited her family, offering to provide full financial support in exchange for Emily's hand in marriage. "I care deeply for Emily," Victor said, addressing her parents as they sat together in their modest living room. "I want to take care of her and your family. I have the means to ensure that you never have to worry about money again. All I ask is that you consider my offer." Emily's parents were impressed. They had struggled for so long, and the thought of a wealthy man like Victor taking care of their family was tempting. They urged Emily to think about it, to consider what was best for her future. But Emily was conflicted. Victor represented everything that made sense: stability, security, and honesty, at least on the surface. But her heart still ached for Alex. The pressure was mounting, and Emily knew she couldn't put off her decision forever. She had to choose between the safe, comfortable life Victor offered and the deep, undeniable connection she still felt for Alex. Word about Alex's secret life as a security guard spread quickly through business circles. What had started as a private experiment had now become public knowledge. When Alex's parents found out, they were furious. They had initially thought Alex had simply taken some time off to deal with personal matters, but the revelation that he had deliberately lowered himself to live like a commoner and was involved with a woman from a modest background was too much for them to bear. Alex's father, a powerful figure both in the business world and within his own family, called an emergency meeting. His mother, equally upset, paced around the room, unable to believe that her son, whom they had groomed to take over the family business, would jeopardize everything they had built. "Do you understand what you've done, Alex?" his father demanded, his voice stern. "You've risked the entire company, your reputation, and now you're entangled with this woman from a lower-class background. Have you completely lost your mind?" Alex sat silently, feeling the weight of their disappointment. His mother stepped in, her tone cold and demanding. "You've brought shame to this family, Alex. You were supposed to carry on our legacy, not tarnish it by living like a beggar. And now your company is on the verge of collapse." Alex knew they were right about the state of the company. Victor's sabotage had left our enterprises in a vulnerable position, and Alex's distractions hadn't helped. The company was in dire need of support, and unfortunately, his family held the financial strings. His father narrowed his eyes. Here's how this is going to go. You will end this foolish relationship with that woman immediately, and you will marry a woman from a respectable, wealthy family, someone who can support our business interests. If you don't, we will cut you off from the family business in no time. That includes any financial support. Alex felt a cold knot form in his stomach. Before now, he wouldn't have needed his family's money. His company had always been profitable, and he had never been dependent on them. But things had changed. With his company hanging by a thread, and his father being a major member of the board, Alex was trapped. If they cut him off, our enterprises would likely crumble under the weight of its current crisis. You can't force me to marry someone I don't love, Alex said quietly, though his voice trembled with uncertainty. His father's expression hardened. Watch us. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, Emily was dealing with her own family pressures. Her father's health had stabilized for now, but the financial burden on the family was still immense. Victor's offer of support had seemed like a godsend, and now her father was pushing her to accept his proposal. You need to think about the future, Emily, her father said one evening, his voice weak but firm. Victor is offering us security. Please think about it. Emily's heart ached. She knew her father meant well, but he didn't understand how complicated her feelings were. Victor was generous and wealthy, but her heart still belonged to Alex. Even after all the lies and hurt, she couldn't let go of the love she had felt for him. But how could she turn her back on her family when they needed her? As the pressure mounted from both sides, Emily felt trapped. Should she choose security and marry Victor as her father wished? Or should she follow her heart despite everything that had happened between her and Alex? The tension between them had reached a breaking point, and Alex knew he couldn't go on like this. He had to tell Emily the full truth about his wealth, his family, and his real feelings for her. He needed to be honest, no matter the outcome. One evening, Emily finally agreed to meet Alex. She hadn't spoken to him in weeks, and the silence had been agonizing for both of them. When they met at a quiet park, the air between them was thick with unspoken emotions. Emily, Alex began, his voice heavy with the weight of what he needed to say. I need to tell you everything. No more secrets. Emily looked at him, her face unreadable. Go on, she said softly. Alex took a deep breath and told her everything. How he had grown up in a wealthy family, how he had taken over the company, and how he had hidden his true identity because he wanted to find someone who would love him for who he really was, not for his money. I never meant to hurt you, Alex said, his voice cracking. I thought I was doing the right thing by not telling you, but I see now that it was wrong. I love you, Emily. I've loved you from the beginning, and I need you to know that. Emily listened in silence, her heart torn. Hearing Alex speak so openly about his feelings stirred emotions she had tried to suppress. Despite everything, she still loved him, but the hurt and betrayal still lingered. Alex continued, I'm in a mess right now. My family is threatening to cut me off from the company if I don't end things with you and marry someone else. They don't understand that you're the only one who's ever seen the real me. Tears filled Emily's eyes, but she didn't speak. She felt everything bubbling up inside her. Her love for Alex, her loyalty to her family, and the pressure to choose between security and her heart. I don't care about all that money without you in my life, Alex said, his voice full of desperation. I care about you, but I understand if you can't forgive me. Emily swallowed hard, her emotions swirling. She had never imagined it would come to this. Alex had laid his heart bare, but she couldn't bring herself to respond just yet. She needed time to think, to sort through the overwhelming feelings inside her. Without saying anything, she stood up and walked away, leaving Alex sitting alone in the park, his heart heavy with uncertainty. After her emotionally charged meeting with Alex, Emily returned home, feeling overwhelmed. Her heart was heavy with the weight of his words, but as she walked up to the front door, she noticed something unusual. Standing in the living room, surrounded by her family, was Victor. He had brought flowers and a gift, and her parents were beaming with pride. Victor smiled at Emily as she walked in. "Emily, I've been waiting for you," he said, stepping forward with confidence. He took a deep breath, then got down on one knee. "Emily, I care deeply for you, and I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Marry me, and I'll make sure you and your family are always taken care of. You'll never have to worry again." The room fell silent as everyone waited for Emily's response. Her mother's eyes were filled with hope. Her father nodded in approval, and her friends seemed to hold their breath, eager for her to say yes. But Emily felt paralyzed. This was everything her family had wanted for her. Security, stability, a life without financial struggles, and yet her heart was still with Alex, the man she had never stopped loving, no matter how she tried to stay away from him. Just as Emily was about to speak, a knock came at the door. Her heart raced, and before anyone could react, the door swung open. Alex stood there, out of breath and desperate, his eyes locking onto Emily's. "Emily, wait," Alex said, stepping inside, ignoring the confused and shocked expressions around him. "I need to talk to you." Victor stood up, clearly irritated. "What are you doing here, Alex?" he asked, his voice cold. Alex ignored him, his gaze never leaving Emily. "Emily, I know I've made mistakes, and I know I've hurt you, but I can't let you go without telling you this. I'm willing to walk away from everything. My fortune, my family's business, all of it. None of it matters if I can't be with you." Emily's breath caught in her throat. She could see the sincerity in Alex's eyes, and for a brief moment the love she had buried deep inside her began to resurface. But before she could say anything, there was another loud noise at the door. Alex's parents stormed in, furious. His father pointed at him angrily. "Alex, what are you doing? You're making a fool of yourself for this girl. We didn't raise you to throw away everything for a relationship that has no future." Alex's mother stepped forward, her face twisted with anger. "This is the last straw. If you continue this nonsense, you're done, Alex. You'll be cut off from the family business. You won't have a penny left." The room exploded into chaos as Alex's parents berated him for his choices, their voices growing louder as they tried to pressure him into leaving Emily. Victor stood aside, watching the scene unfold with a smug expression that gave way to irritation as Alex's presence began to steal the moment away from him. Emily's parents, too, felt the tension rising. Her father, already weak from his illness, looked at her with pleading eyes. "Emily, we need this. Victor is offering us security. Please think about the future." The pressure from all sides became too much for Emily to bear. Her heart pounded as the voices of her parents, Alex's family, and Victor swirled around her, each pulling her in a different direction. But deep down, she knew what she had to do. "Stop," Emily shouted, her voice cutting through the noise. Everyone fell silent, their eyes now on her. Tears welled up in her eyes as she looked at Alex, then at Victor, and finally at her parents. "I'm not a pawn in some billionaire's game," she said, her voice shaking but determined. "I refuse to be pushed around and forced into something just because it's convenient for everyone else. This is my life, and I'm tired of feeling like I don't have control over it." Emily turned to Victor, who still held the ring. "Victor, I appreciate everything you've done, but I can't marry you. This isn't what I want." She then faced Alex, her voice softening. "Alex, I loved you. I really did, but I can't go back to that. There's too much pain, too much confusion. I can't be with someone when everything is so broken." Finally, Emily turned to her parents, tears now flowing freely. "I love you both, but you're asking me to give up my heart for security. I just can't do it. I won't live like this." Emily walked out of the room, leaving behind both Alex and Victor, her family, and all the pressures that had been weighing her down. She needed time to find herself again, free from the expectations of everyone around her. Alex stood there, heartbroken but also filled with a strange sense of respect for Emily's decision. She had chosen to walk away from everything, just as he had been willing to do. But now she was gone, and Alex knew there was nothing he could do to change that. His parents continued to scold him, but Alex no longer cared about their threats. He had made his choice. He wasn't going to live his life based on their expectations anymore. He returned home, determined to unravel his connections to his family, even if it meant starting over on his own terms. He was done with the manipulation, the pressure, and the lies. It was time to build a life that was truly his. Meanwhile, Emily's family was left in shock after her departure. As time passed, Emily's father's health took a turn for the worse once again. The hospital bills began to pile up, and the family found themselves struggling once more. Victor had disappeared after Emily rejected him, leaving them desperate and alone. Despite Emily's decision to walk away from Victor, Alex couldn't stand to see her family suffer once again. He quietly stepped in to cover the medical bills, arranging for the hospital to receive the payments anonymously. He didn't expect Emily to thank him or come back to him. He simply couldn't bear the thought of her father's condition worsening without help. Even as Emily pushed him away, Alex continued to love her from afar, knowing that some things were more important than pride or heartbreak. The quiet hum of the hospital machines was the only sound in the room when Emily's father took his last breath. Emily sat by his bedside, holding his hand, tears streaming down her face as she realized he was gone. Her heart shattered as she said goodbye to the man who had raised her. The weight of grief was overwhelming, and at that moment she felt utterly lost. But amid her devastation, something began to dawn on her. In the weeks leading up to her father's death, the hospital bills had been paid without question. Even after Victor had disappeared from their lives, it didn't make sense. If Victor wasn't helping her family, who was? Determined to find out the truth, Emily reached out to the hospital administration. After some probing, she learned the shocking truth. It had been Alex all along. He had been the one quietly supporting her family, even after she had cut him off. Victor had let her believe he was the benefactor, but it had always been Alex working in the background, expecting nothing in return. Realizing her mistake, Emily felt a deep sense of guilt. She had pushed away the one man who had truly cared for her and her family, and now she needed to make things right. Emily sought out Alex, her heart pounding with anticipation and nerves. She had no idea where he was or what he had been doing since they had last spoken, but she was determined to find him and apologize. After some searching, she finally tracked him down to a modest apartment on the outskirts of the city. When she knocked on the door, it swung open to reveal Alex standing in simple clothes, looking surprised to see her. He had lost his position as CEO and had been disowned by his family, but there was something different about him. He seemed lighter, freer, as though a great burden had been lifted off his shoulders. "Emily," Alex said, his voice full of surprise. Emily's eyes filled with tears as she stepped inside. "Alex, I'm so sorry. I was wrong about everything. I found out that it was you who had been helping my family all along, even after I pushed you away. I don't know how I could have been so blind." Alex smiled softly. "You didn't know. I didn't want you to feel like you owed me anything." Emily shook her head, her voice trembling. "I don't care about the money or the help. I care about you. I've always loved you." "I love you too, Emily," Alex said, pulling her into his arms. "I've always loved you." In the months that followed, Alex and Emily rebuilt their lives together, free from the pressures of wealth, family, and society. They decided to marry in a small, intimate ceremony far away from the spotlight. The wedding was simple but filled with love, just the way they had always wanted it. Surrounded by a few close friends and family members, Emily's mother thanked Alex for all his support and apologized for having judged him and believed Victor was their benefactor. Emily and Alex exchanged vows, promising to stand by each other through thick and thin. As the days turned into weeks, Alex's family began to soften their stance. Emily's mother, devastated by the thought of losing her only son, pressured Alex's father to reconsider their position. She had seen how happy Alex was with Emily and realized that it wasn't wealth or status that made her son who he was. It was his determination, his heart, and the love he shared with Emily. Slowly, even Alex's father came around, realizing that Emily hadn't negatively influenced Alex as they had once feared. Instead, she had brought out the best in him, showing him a world beyond money and power. Eventually, his parents reached out to reconcile, admitting that they had been wrong. Though the road to forgiveness wasn't easy, Alex welcomed them back into his life. He understood that they had only wanted what they thought was best for him, even if it had hurt him in the process. As life moved forward, things began to fall into place for Alex. His new startup, A project he had poured his heart and soul into and sold his previous company to fund, began to take off. The company grew quickly, gaining attention for its innovation and fresh approach. Soon, Alex was once again on the path to success, but this time he did it on his own terms, free from the weight of his family's expectations. One day, Alex received an unexpected call from the board members of R Enterprises, the company he had once founded. Since his departure, things had gone downhill, and no one else had been able to manage the company as well as Alex had. The board members, desperate to turn things around, begged him to return as CEO. Alex thought long and hard about the offer. He had built R Enterprises from the ground up, but he had also built something new, Tech Solutions, a company he was proud of. In the end, Alex decided to focus on his new company, though he agreed to help R Enterprises remotely as an advisor. His wealth and success grew once more, but this time, he and Emily lived a simpler, happier life together. Alex and Emily walked hand in hand toward their future, free from the pressures that had once weighed them down. They had overcome all odds, wealth, family, and society, and had built a life based on love, trust, and mutual respect. As they looked out over the horizon, ready to face whatever challenges came next, they knew that nothing could break the bond they had forged.